we had a really powerful sort of, I think, wrap up in the sense that there's such a big conversation right now about HR leading the AI conversation, and more importantly, about HR sort of really owning their brand as the one organization function that understands how to deal with behavior and performance. Now that that's not just a human conversation, but actually a technology conversation. And so that was really, really good. We had a lot of good people came up and talked to us. I had people who stopped me and said that the idea of planning for positions and hiring for skills and roles was really powerful. I have a whole big session on that that maybe we can sort of wrap up later on. But it is nice when you get that kind of feedback where people get a chance to kind of tell you that how they're taking away pieces and parts from your sessions.
Welcome to the HR Huddle podcast, presented by Sapient Insights Group, the ultimate resource for all things HR. It's time to get in the huddle.
Welcome, everyone, to Spilling the Tea on HR Tech, where we focus on the hottest HR tech news everyone needs to know to be in the know. We break down the news of the week and help you make sense of what it means for our industry and how it can impact your organization. And we're recording today, November 25th, 2025. We are just a couple days before Thanksgiving here in the United States. And so we'll have a lot of thankful conversation today with my co-host. But I am your host, Stacey Harris, Chief Research Officer and Managing Partner for Sapient Insights Group, a research and advisory firm, if you don't know who we are. And joining me today is my co-host, Cliff Stevenson, Director of Research and Principal Analyst for Sapient Insights Group. Cliff, welcome to the show again. I mean, you're so decked out in pink. I'm feeling almost a little bit drab today.
Well, not only that,
are listening and not watching on YouTube, or we are going to start posting this up the Work to Find page as well for their video. But Cliff is bright hot pink with a couple of logo items. Where did you get from?
This jacket's self-made.
Yeah.
We had that in. I feel like I'm on the sort of Sapient Insights Group sports team. I've got the hat on. I feel very sort of Ted Lasso. I'm always behind the times. I finally started watching that. But in deference and to help out the eyeballs of our watchers, I will tone down a little bit of the pink forward. But as Stacey mentioned, we do have a YouTube page. You can glance over that. Anyone viewing this, and you mentioned Work to Find, will know that our last episode 2 weeks ago was the live from HR Tech put together by Work to Find. I think they did a really great job on that. So let us know what you thought, if you liked that sort of hyper stylized report out that was there for your holiday viewing pleasure. I believe that one will drop on Thanksgiving. So hopefully lots for you to discuss with your family.
Yes. And then by the time they get back from the holidays, if they're in the United States, they will be able to see you and the bright pink. I do have to point out, we do not tell Cliff he has to do this. He is like, I don't know what level of employee engagement this is, Cliff, but like he goes out and makes his own clothing with the logo, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. I need one of those now.
Yeah, these are for sale now. We'll put them up in the merch shop. Just kidding.
We're going to start a merch shop just for because Cliff's got cool ideas about what he can make there. But it's like a pink lady jacket is what it is, Cliff.
Yeah, I could box perhaps. It's got the hoodie.
Yeah, there you got the hoodie.
I'm ready to go.
See? Yeah,
this is going to be taken out of context, I think. Someone's going to clip this and just have no idea what's going on in the show anymore. But you are spilling the tea there. You're letting them know what goes on behind the scenes, and that's what we do in this show.
That's definitely what we do in this show. We have so much to talk about. I don't know that we're going to get through it all in an hour, but we're going to try today. I mean, Cliff, where are we starting? There's TT, and then there's a little bit of scuttlebutt from all these different conversations.
Well, something light, little cucumber sandwiches, whet appetite here at T. The big story, the biggest story of all, of course, is our survey. That is what everyone's waiting on. That has been out since, I think we've had 2 episodes since the full report's been out. This is the first episode, though, where all segments are now available for purchase on the website. We understand it's 380 pages. It covers the viewpoints of 10,000 different participants, 4,600 plus unique organizations worldwide, very large and increased population of people from EMEA. We're going to be talking a lot about Europe because Stacey just got back from Barcelona. But so there is something for everyone. You know, we're talking emerging tech in this one. We talk about contingent labor, frontline workers, you name it. We're going to be talking about it, but maybe you don't want to read all 380 pages. Find the section that you want. All of those are available. Quick download. You can go check that out. But as mentioned, we've been doing some traveling. This is the season. I think we mentioned that in our special, sort of spilling the tea on what an analyst does that we did with George LaRoque. But a lot of it is seasonal travel. We are in the thick of it. Stacey, you just got back.
We did. Yeah, I just got back from Barcelona, which was beautiful. Of course, although I think the day I left was the coldest day of the year for Barcelona. So I don't know. Maybe I brought the cold weather there. So yeah, we'll talk a little bit about Workday EMEA, but we also wrapped up our iSolved Connect events in Scottsdale and Phoenix, which that was really great. We've had pretty good audiences, definitely here in the fall and even in the spring, because we did 4 of the iSolved Connect events regional. I think next year they're now doing, I think, 9 or 11. They've decided to go back to sort of a lot more cities instead of sort of 4 big cities. But we think we had over 150, maybe 300. I don't know. The numbers I got different numbers that attended the Connect event in Phoenix and Scottsdale. The audience was great. We had a really powerful sort of, I think, wrap up in the sense that there's such a big conversation right now about HR leading the AI conversation, and more importantly, about HR sort of really owning their brand as the one organization function that understands how to deal with behavior and performance, now that that's not just a human conversation, but actually a technology conversation. And so that was really, really good. We had a lot of good people who came up and talked to us. I had people who stopped me and said that the idea of recruiting for or hiring for planning for positions and hiring for skills and roles was really powerful. I have a whole big session on that that maybe we can sort of wrap up later on. But, you know, it is nice when you get that kind of feedback where people get a chance to kind of tell you that how they're taking away pieces and parts from your sessions. You then, I think that same week was at Atlanta at the Unit 4 event. What's going on with that, Cliff?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Unit 4 is one that sometimes I think we don't mention very often here. I mean, they are an ERP. And not only that, they're very European, both in their headquarters and who they serve. And that has always been interesting. It's one that we've always worked with and we always find interesting because, again, it blends this idea of what is considered HR. I mean, they do have HCM technology and they are always expanding into that area. One of the things I always find fascinating about them and that I always really enjoy and of their leadership and of how they kind of do these events is it is very upfront. There was no sort of NDA on the slides. They were very matter of fact. There was not a lot of let me get back to you on that. They would just answer the question, and some of these were tough questions. One of the things that struck me as I started to do some of the math of looking through their leadership team, and by the way, one of the things we did mention on this show is that they have a new CEO, Simon Paris, replacing their CEO who had been there for years and years, and one of the founders. But of their leadership team, at least of the C-suite, only the CTO, Klaus Jemsen, has been there longer than 3 years. So they really believe in consistency in the product, which is going to sound a little strange, but that's one of the things that they have been kind of bringing people on to make sure that that stays with it, right? To make sure that they have that vision for the future. And they're very future focused. And they've also built a whole new sales team as they look to expand more into the US. So we had a lot of really good conversations with them, very direct about how they may adopt different technologies, obviously a very AI forward strategy. And of course, that means they may need to put into effect different pricing strategies. That was one of the things that they mentioned that they are going to review over the coming weeks. They had brought everyone into the US to discuss whether there would be move towards a token or usage type environment, which is something we've been talking to a few different companies about, and many of them aren't as direct and open about their possibility of a future plan for that. There's been, obviously, by the time any listener hears this, they'll probably have seen some information about NVIDIA stock or the volatility of what's going on with OpenAI. And that has made a lot of the people that are sort of reliant on those services a little nervous. So believe me that is not unnoticed by the leaders at these teams. And it was refreshing to see them so open about looking at scenario planning.
Yeah, I mean, scenario planning, what I think we called it in the I have this sort of chart that's at the front of a lot of my presentations is right now that kind of says what 2026 and 2027 are going to look like. And we have, a lot of different ways that people are sort of doing things. But one of them is we're shifting from risk mitigation, which is what happens right now, to basically outright managing risk planning, which basically means that they are building in the cost of whatever those risks are as just an assumed 10 or 15% they're going to have to tack on top of everything they're doing. I think someone called it managed chaos planning is what they said.
That's
So
my cleaning strategy, actually.
right, yeah. It's I think again, CEOs right now are just assuming there will be something, whether it is a environmental issue, a social issue, a socioeconomic issue, a global unrest issue. There's something that's going to disrupt the product, and they're just going to have to get figure out what that percentage is they're going to lose because of it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You figure if you're an ERP, you got to walk the walk, and that's what that's what Unit 4 is, and one of the best at it. So that was really neat to see. But we're again sort of dancing around the things that are like HR, but aren't quite. You were at a very interesting summit that becomes more and more relevant as we talk about companies like Hi Bob, sort of dipping their toes into the finance world. You were at the Finance and Accounting Technology Expo, or FADE, as I think we have been calling it.
Fade is what they call it. Yeah.
Okay.
And that was in New York, the 13th and 14th. So I kind of did 1.5 day there and then ran over back to Scottsdale to ISOL. And we ran roundtables at that event that were sort of separate from the event, but part of the event. And we had 4 sponsored organizations who were running those roundtables with us. That was Paychex, Cornerstone, Salary.com, and iSolved. It was nice. That was a really wide mix of organizations. One thing that I learned very much is I said, they had Marcus Lehman, I think it's called The Prophet, right? In the finance space, right? Was their keynote speaker. And it was so funny. I told this story a couple times, but I know he was giving his whole presentation to the audience. The audience is filled of sort of accountants and CFOs and finance analysts and the whole bit, right? Like a wide mix, just like our HR conferences are. And he goes, I just want to know, I want to let you know, I understand you really want to be respected more. You want a seat at the table. You want people to understand how hard you are working and how hard this effort is. And I'm listening to this and I'm going, wow, we could take this whole presentation, shift it and lift it and send it right over to HR and
Yeah.
it would resonate just as well, right? Because the audience was enthralled with all the conversation was having, right? He was saying, we need to make better partnerships. We need to talk about labor management. And I was just like, wow, everything he's talking about like would resonate on the HR side, which again reminded me we are more alike than we are different in many cases. And then once we got the people into the roundtable sessions, we didn't. One of the things we learned, and we're going to sort of reassess for next year as we go through and do this, is that we have to definitely be in the general area where all the other sessions are at. The room we were in was a little off to the side. It was a little hard for everyone to find, which made it hard. So some of our roundtables, we were challenged with people finding the rooms. It was nicer because they were quieter, but that doesn't help if people can't find you. We were out, the whole team was out with like big signs going, we're here, right? But we did have some really great conversations. Some of my favorite, Cornerstone was talking about labor planning. Mike Bollinger was there with me and Mike Sene, who also works at the Cornerstone team. And they were really talking about sort of like the cost of not having the right skills inside the organization. And Mike created like a calculation that he like shared with the audience, and you could see their eyes lighting up as he was actually giving real numbers and real cost issues right to that. And so that was a really good conversation. And you heard them lean into, okay, if we're going to put sort of a number on skills, what does that actually look like? And then we talked about sort of just the lack of resources, and all of them were having hiring problems, every one of them, right? That was in that room. And so they're finance leaders who are also handling HR and HR technology conversations. Salary.com, with Sean Luentis, it was so good. It was such a great conversation. It was more like a fireside chat we did with them. That one we really got deep into, can you actually do compensation on a skills-based basis? He had some great commentary that if you do that, then what do you do if they don't have the skills? Do you take it away? Or if the skill becomes less valuable, do you take the money away? And you can't, right? So there was some real good conversation there about how we think about compensation and how we manage that effectively. Great questions from the audience on that. I saw conversation on AI and embedded AI. And the one thing I found is that the finance is just as confused about how AI is going to be used in both finance and HR as we in HR sometimes are. lots of good questions from the audience. And we did a round robin with that where we asked them all what their big questions were. And the number one question we heard over and over again was, where do I get started? How do I start understanding this space, right? Which we know is the number one issue in our data set this year, which is knowledge is the biggest reasons why people aren't using AI. And then paychecks, I wasn't there for that when Terry did that roundtable because it was the day of our CEO. Yeah. But that was around, and I think, again, great conversations that really kind of give a sense of how valuable the relationship is between HR and finance and those two working together to manage not just compliance as a way to sort of address risk mitigation, but compliance as a value add to who you are as an organization. So really great conversations. We're definitely thinking that we're probably going to do it next year. We've got a couple of definitely ways to update that next year. But the audiences were highly engaged and highly involved, and they were all finance audience. And so I think this is a space where we've got to have more conversations. I know I'm going to talk a little bit about Workday EMEA, Cliff, but that's a very long conversation. Maybe we'll kind of shift that, talk about the webinars, and then come back to that so I can kind of talk about it with all the acquisitions and all the things that Workday has too. So do you want to maybe cover some of the webinars?
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, we've got quite a few. Kind of in order here, there's going to be 4 just in the month of December. December 4th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. I think it's GMT -5. I'm keeping everything very EU friendly for our friends over there. Will be one we're doing with Anaplan. And that will be how the C-suite can use workforce planning to drive growth. Much like we were talking about Unit 4 being an ERP that's also has HCM capabilities. Anaplan additionally had worked right in financial planning and has in the last few years really worked into workforce planning. So that same idea. How do these different groups work together, right? I like this line that we're using as part of our marketing is how do you fund the future when you're forced to cut the present? With over half, 60 to 70%, depending on your organization industry, of operating expenses tied to people. How do you then invest in AI, and what does that look like, and how do you find that value? You just mentioned sort of offhand where we're seeing uses of AI from the paper. Finding that data and what data sources you can trust is part of that. So that's kind of what we're hoping to do, is hoping to give you that information to help you make those big decisions for the future.
Yeah, and with that webinar, we did launch it. It's about 40 pages long. It's a really great research paper where we actually dug into how organizations are using workforce planning across the different industries and sizes, and looked at it from the CEO, CHRO, CFO, CIO, and COO perspective. Like, what are the things they want out of it? And what are the things that they can take action in to work together? And so that was a really fun project to work on. So. Yeah,
that sounds amazing. I'll admit I haven't read it yet, but I'm going to. That's available now on our website, correct?
I believe it's available on our website, and it's available through this webinar registration. If you register, then I think you'll get access to it too.
A quick search for any of those sort of Anaplan, Sapient Insights group together. C-suite workforce planning, that should find it for you if you don't see it on the site. December 9th. Oh, yep.
I was just going to say December 9th, we're doing Hi Bob. I think that's going to be, that's me. And I think that we got a Hi Bob representative doing that. And that's service that scales rethinking the engagement in HR tech. This one is about kind of managed services, kind of rolling out how people are rethinking the service model in the HR tech space. And a little bit of that will go along with sort of what HiBob is doing with their new payroll rollout, right? And so we're going to have one of their team members speaking with us on that. And that one's from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. because we are going to hit that European audience as well.
Yeah, speaking of, we're looking out for you, our European friends. And we mentioned groups working together. And, sometimes these things they tend to kind of all come together. And sure enough, December 10th, that one's with ADP. I'm sure you know who they are. And that will be how HR and IT need to work together. That is probably true of all groups, but HR and IT definitely at this time, great inflection point for both of our industries in the advent of AI requires us to work together. There is no aspect of these new technologies that don't involve both people and technology, the purviews of both of these big groups. So what do we do with that? What do we do with all this info? Well, that's what we're talking about.
And we're going to be talking with that, how do we connect those dots on integration, right? So we'll be talking a little bit about ADP's approach to their new integration platform. Joining us on that will be Tim Crawford from Avoya, who is a IT analyst. So he does a lot of the events on the IT side. And me and him started talking and thought, boy, it would be great to have this conversation live in front of people. And then ADP said, boy, we'd love to join that conversation. That's sort of how that webinar came about, which I think is a good way to sort of bring that about, because it's a little bit more about fun stuff to talk about. And then you're going to be doing a webinar on December 17th with IREM, and that's just going to be an update on what we're finding on the key findings, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So we have had key findings webinars. Obviously, we did a live, not even a webinar, just a seminar. I was trying to remember what the original form of that word was. Talk, a key findings speech. And HR Tech, obviously, we've done our own. But IRA, one of the big certification and education groups in HR, will be hosting that. That will be at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. So a little later for our European friends and extremely late for our APAC listeners. But I'm sure there will be a recording of it, but that will be key findings from our most recent survey that we were referencing. If there has been any sort of updates or anything that we've seen in the month post, obviously those will be brought up. But it's a good way also to interact. These are always, all of these webinars, I should mention, we really put a premium within reason, depending on capabilities and time, of interacting. Almost always, Stacey and I try to work together and support one speaking and the other one engaging. So if you've got questions, don't be shy at all. We love to hear them. We really make an effort to answer as much as possible. We feel that is who we are. We are data providers. So we love it. No question is bad, except for, is there a copy of this webinar available?
Yeah.
We will tell you at it. I'm just kidding. There's always a copy.
There's always a copy. We don't always give the entire deck because sometimes the deck's really big, and so sometimes we give you like links to things. But yeah, it is funny. There's a lot of webinars we're doing this month. I think just as a commentary to the market, like a lot of times these webinars are conversations we have at events. We're like, oh, that would be good, and then somebody says, oh yeah, and then there's a sponsor that ends up deciding to sort of buy into that conversation. It is. I think there's a lot of ways that people are communicating right now, a little overwhelm on where there is the market. What I do think that we do a little differently in ours is we try very hard, although I always speed talk and do talk a lot at people, but we try very hard to, like you said, make sure that there is something in there for everybody, right? So hopefully that plays out as people are listening to us. Speaking of something in there for everybody, the transition. Yeah, the Workday EMEA event, I could spend the next hour, and we're already 20 minutes in, on just talking about webinars and events that we've been to, Cliff. We haven't gotten to the tea stuff.
Well, there's two big stories from Workday, so maybe you could kind of blend that all together.
Yes.
Would you be willing to do that for us? I will get my sipping tea and listen along with you, listeners and viewers, because we had an acquisition, right? Or at least an agreement to acquire, as well as an expansion, and then all sorts of stuff. You got the insider, you got the tea on. Let's hear it. Clear the throat. Get some nice soothing.
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing to know, so I've been going to the Workday EMEA event, I think for about 5 years now, maybe 6. I didn't go to the very first ones, but I went probably about 3 years in. And my first one, I think there was maybe not quite 1,000 customers at that point in time in the EMEA market who were using the Workday product. Today, now there were 6,000 people at this event. And the numbers I got were kind of two different numbers, but basically it was somewhere between 2,300 and 2,700 plus individual EMEA-based customers now, which is really good for when you think about Workday and the growth they've had in just the last couple of years. Billy, who is running and leading that, has done a fabulous job, I think, building trust in that community and building trust in that market. Carl was there, their CEO, the new product leaders, and they've got a new CTO who was there. They have a new head of AI, Ashna, who we love dearly, who is head of the sort of HCM product line overall. All of them were there and had good presentations on the all the different areas that they're talking about. A couple of big things I think that I really took away from. One is Workday is not just focusing on Europe anymore. They are heavily investing in the ME part of that EMEA. So they are opening up their Middle East focused, they have clients down in that area. They're definitely investing in opening up offices in that area, and we're probably going to hear a lot more from that. We also heard that they are opening up an expanded office in India. So again, they're going after Asia Pac market at a much higher level than they have previously. So global is definitely on their radar. So that's just an overall on that. The one thing that we did hear here too is they had a lot of partnerships that were announced in this conversation. So we saw a big partnership with one of the announcements here with the expansion of what we call Workday Go. So Workday Go is a mixture of services and sort of pre-configurations to roll out a Workday at a much faster pace and at a much more cost-effective pace for mid-market and SMB organizations particularly, but they do a little bit of that for upmarket too. So one of the things that we got as was a big announcement was that Workday Go was expanding, and that is going to be to global payroll partners. And one of the big global payroll partners who they're partnering with at a pretty high level that they brought up on stage was Remote, which there was a lot of kind of surprise by us because they also have big partnerships with Strata. They have good partnerships with ADP. So Remote's definitely got an employer of record as part of what they do. They're a growing global sort of SMB, sort of mid-market payroll. And I think what they're really thinking about is that Workday Go, which is that sort of wrapped up all-in-one implementation, which is a much cheaper, faster implementation model because it's kind of pre-configured, is part of what they're expanding with that. So I think we'll hear more about that as they bring other partners into that. They're being very careful about partners that they're bringing into these conversations, but Remote got a lot of attention while they were there. You saw some announcements of them saying that they are now the global payroll engine for Workday. I wouldn't take that. That's a little bit out of context. I think they are one of many in there. The other big thing that was a big announcement for me was that they announced a Workday data lake. And that was interesting because what that is they're basically saying, like, if you don't have the resources or you don't want to have your own data lake, and data lakes are really expensive, and there's a lot of relationship they have with Snowflake and a couple other organizations, Databricks, on sort of building out those kind of environments. They're saying, look, we're now going to offer a version of this with chunked off of areas that is a Workday version that you can use as a data lake as well, because we are seeing almost all the customers are trying to sort of get their data into some architecture. So that was interesting for them. I thought that's well worth sort of paying attention to. They also mentioned that while they were doing all of this sort of server and data technology, that they now have see if I can get the language right on this. I want to make sure that I get it right, is that they have a EU sovereign ready, and I'm probably going to completely get that messed up, but basically they now have, we don't know all the details on this. Anita Lincoln, who I was there with, is a good friend of mine, and she's probably getting more details on it. Won't get an update on it. They now basically have an environment through AWS, but that is owned and on-premise and tenanted off for the EU market that fits the new EU requirements for sovereign data management.
Oh, I see. So not unlike what we used to see from Russia on the sovereign.
Russia. Exactly. Yeah.
Location.
And that's been getting to be a bigger issue as we're seeing that particularly US-based companies are not abiding by sort of the amount of limitations that the EU market wants to put on data access. And so that's definitely was a big thing for them to get in place right now. And it was a lot of questions we got on that from the executive panel that we talked to them. All right. The other big thing here, which is probably the one that I would say most people saw and are talking about, is the acquisition of Pipedream. Not to be confused with Pipedrive, which is a CRM that we use right now. But Pipedream is basically a connector solution that uses MCPs, which we're going to talk a little bit more about later. We're not going to get into that right now, but they are a connective tool. This was like an acquisition the day we were all there. So it was brand new. A lot of people didn't even know about it. There's been a lot of acquisitions they recently had. We talked already about Sana as an acquisition, a couple of other acquisitions. Paradox was recently acquired. I think they have like 6 acquisitions in just the last sort of 12 to 24 months for Workday. That's a huge amount. This is all about connectors. And what was really interesting is when we talked to the executives, so we had a panel with Carl and all of the teams afterwards, and they basically said, hey, we went to Garrett and said, how long would it take you to build out these connectors? And he told them it would be over a year. and they said, okay, anything that's going to be over a year or more than 6 months that we can acquire, we're going to acquire now, right? Like that's where they're at and how fast they want to move with AI. This is a connector platform, particularly focused on AI and AI workflow tools that has over 3,000 connections. So what that means by connections is pre-built in connections for things like Asana, HubSpot, Jira, Recruitly, Slack, all those things. They don't have to pre-build them. It is an API management tool using an MCP. We'll talk more about what an MCP is. So it will handle the security. It'll handle the translation of data back and forth. Integration platforms are the number one challenge for people trying to make agents work right now. Agents don't work if they can't access the external systems to do the work you want them to do. And so basically, Workday just invested in that. And then I think the only other thing to sort of mention from this event that I really think that not everyone else is talking about is that, Workday really they've spent a lot of time on making sure that they are configurable enough to handle all the different variations of things that an HR function and now a finance function could need to do. They are now trying to become the not just the information platform, but the experience platform. And what I mean by that is they want to become the front door. That's where Sana is going to be. They want to become your AI platform for managing your security and your AI environment. And they want to be the place where you're sort of integrating all your data, but from a finance and an HR perspective. They are very clear that they do not want to be a CRM. They do not want to be a IT infrastructure environment. But you did hear inklings of some of that in their language, that they are now wanting to be an ERP, which previously Workday would never have used the language ERP, but they are now saying, yes, we are the next generation ERP. I did warn them that the word next generation is a little bit of a bad connotation in the HR space. We know there were a couple of products that came out as next generation that didn't quite go as well as they had wanted to. But they are trying to basically say we're rethinking the idea of an ERP that you were talking about, Cliff, right? And I think that's probably the bigger conversation there. A more global, more AI structured, more sort of question and answer based, headless to some extent, but with all this powerful data, all this connectivity to across your organization. And more importantly, that it also has all the security that you put on every human being also being put on every agent that you're putting out there. And those are the two things I think that they're bringing to the table that are going to be most interesting over time. There was a lot of conversations I had with their Mariana, who heads up their contingent workforce management space. I think their ability to connect contingent workforce management with workforce scheduling, with labor planning, with financial planning, if you know how to get all that talking in a system and you set up the configuration appropriately and you are using the entire Workday system, you can see a lot farther around the corners, even in this AI space, than others might be able to, because you've got all of this in that view. So I think that's going to be the real win for them. But to do that, they've got to get all this connectivity happen, which is why the Pipedream acquisition was so important for them. There is a lot more. I am going to try and write this up. I have not done my write-up yet. I got back from EMEA and went right into getting a bunch of work done here in the States. I will probably do a write-up after the Thanksgiving holidays that will have a little bit more on this. But we're going to get into the pay equity in Europe a little bit later in our conversation here. There's so much that I feel like I'm probably still missing a big part of it, but those are the big things I would say, right? And there's a lot more acquisitions going on even besides Workdays right now, right, Cliff?
There is, and we're going to get to that. But you know what? I'm going to take us out of our normal order just because I really am interested in some of the topics you brought up. And I think it's best if we stop teasing our poor listeners on this MCP thing. But first, you did mention some regulations in the EU. As long as we are mentally in Europe, aren't we all still mentally in Barcelona?
It was, I will say, the food in Barcelona was very good. The weather was not as great, but the food was very good that week, yes.
Well, just about a week ago, we saw some movement from the European Commission on two proposals. Basically, these are amendments to their existing sort of IT and AI regulations, the Digital Omnibus Regulation and the AI Act. These are amendments. They're called simplification amendments, right? So basically, they extended the timeline under a lot of pressure from the big tech firms in the United States. It was going to be August 2026. That no longer applies. It's December 2027 for most of this definition of high-risk AI and all the different regulations that go in for that. GDPR has changes as well because there will be some changing definitions on what constitutes personal data and what is anonymized, what's pseudonymized. That's basically using a fake name. Yeah. They're testing the pronunciations today. Some other biometric information, what you have to do during data breaches, and some AI governance acts. Most of these are, most all of these, in fact, all of these are sort of making it easier regulations from the side of the tech providers, which in turn makes it easier for most HR people to handle this, right? Either it'll be farther down the road or there'll be less work that you have to do. The idea is to reduce administrative burden, at least that's how it's kind of being sold there. Some clear rules and that sort of thing. So you can, as Stacey mentioned, there are specialists in this area that we've mentioned before. You mentioned Anita, Heather Bussing, a few others that you can reach out to if you want some specific breakdowns. But that is what's happening there. For the MCP.
Before we jump into that, let me do one additional thing on this, because
not
only is that those regulations, I think clarity gives us the ability to move faster in AI. It is one of the things we are missing here in the U.S. In the U.S., we're stripping away actually more regulations. Actually, there's a bill out right now. I don't know if it'll actually get passed, but will deny states the ability to make their own individual laws on AI. That's something to watch. That will allow us to will allow a lot more freedom, but will also put a lot more risk for how AI is going to be used in the US market. So something to keep an eye on. In the EU, one of the things that is sort of driving that kind of change is also because they are passing other big laws. The EU pay equity law, which we got sort of a deep dive on while I was there from the EMEA audience. Anita Lenkin has done a huge amount of work on this. She's got a big book on this. She was great to have her there while Workday was explaining this. They basically have partnered with another company, a small firm that does development and is a services-based organization in the EU market, to build out on the Workday platform the reporting capability needed for the EU pay equity. And now I've basically kind of understood that basically the EU pay equity regulations is requiring over the next year or two, depending on where you fall in the things, that you start to bring your pay between male and females and other entities within the sort of protected classes up to equal pay ratios. And if you're over more than 5%, there's some fines and things that you could get paid out over the next 2 years. But the bigger issue is that, yes, you've got about 2 years to get to some of that, but the reporting starts pretty immediately, like in the next 6 months. And that reporting requirement means that I, as an employee, can go in and say, I want to see all of the pay equity information about where my pay falls compared to other females, males within the organization and other diverse groups in the organization. I want to see how that breaks out. And so they basically create a whole separate sort of reporting tool with this partner company that is based off of the requirements here, so that an employee, basically, if they submit a request, will automatically get like a dashboard that shows them all the data. We'll also give them an opportunity to have some commentary back on that data. What's really interesting is they're also flipping this to start to show the companies who need to go in and have the communications that, yes, you're going to see that you are underpaid. And what does that mean in our market, right? So it's really fascinating to see that how, as the EU loosens up regulations here, they're giving more transparency on the other end. If you are someone who has employees in the European market right now and you have not dealt with this, the number one thing I heard over and over again is you do not have enough time to start tomorrow. You've got to start today. That was the one thing that I would come away with that. So lots going on in that market, right? Yeah,
that is fast. Thank you for that one, because it's always interesting. It's one of the values, I think, of going to these events.
If you're looking to explore fresh perspectives, dive into compensation tech, or just enjoy a lively conversation and debates about the evolving world of total rewards, you're in the right place. Welcome to Totally Rewarding Chats, where we discuss the future of compensation, benefits, talent, and all things HR tech. I'm Sean Luchins, VP of Product Strategy at Salary.com, bring years of product and development perspective. Joining me is the bow tie wearing, comp tech loving, experienced guru Paul Ryman, founder and managing partner of Novo Insights. Together, we'll be jamming with guests and sharing candid, unfiltered conversations about total reward strategy, compensation technology, talent trends, and anything else we find interesting in the world of HR.
Because I could imagine, and one we kind of talked about on that special episode, is you can imagine going, well, why couldn't this be an email? Why couldn't this be there? But when you get there and you start to talk to the end users, when you start to get a sense of, to use a modern term, the vibes in the room, and you notice what are the topics and how people are talking about it, and you get a sense for what's really happening and what's really affecting people, not just speculation, I think you kind of get a chance to take all the data that we get that we can be sort of separated from and sort of becomes a little abstract, and then see what that actually means for people out there. So that is very valuable, and thank you for that. Now, here's where we may get ourselves into some trouble, because we're going to try and talk about very technical aspects, but we're going to do our best. That's why we're here. It's in our mandate. But this is related to some news that a few companies have. Vizier was the most recent story. They've launched an MCP, a Model Context Protocol Server. These are servers. It's a term you're going to be hearing if you haven't already, is MCP. There was another story earlier in the year that Microsoft will adopt the use of MCP. It was just launched late 2024 by Anthropic. They're the makers of the Claude AI that you may have used, and it is a quote unquote open source standard. We've often seen it referred to as the USB-C port of AI apps, meaning if you recall the old days of every single phone seemed to have its own little cord, and even just recently Apple and Google use different types of cords for data transfer and for power. Now everyone's kind of going to USB-C, right? So if you think about these servers, and a friend of ours, Josh Kiefer, I believe, from Nuvalex, project manager. What Nuvalex does is a lot along these same lines, right? Which is you take all of these different streams. This is specifically about AI agents, if I'm right. Stacey, you did a little research on here too. And they all have different sort of ways of gathering data, gathering information, and then outputting that information. Come in all sorts of different methods. Here's where any real tech nerds going, what the hell are you talking about? But all of those different outputs can come in different formats, let's say. And so you have these MCP servers that act as a way to receive all of these different kind of cables, all of these different informations coming from AI agents, and then putting that output into your system where it would make sense to you and it would give you the output that you are looking for as a human, the inference that you're looking for as a human. Did I get any of that right, Stacey? Is that more or less how you understand it?
It is. I mean, I think one way to think about it is that we kind of all start to do somewhat understand that like an API is a written code of how I get data from one technology into another technology. And REST API means that they are following protocols or standards. That means that if I'm Workday and I have REST APIs, then I am a CRM like Salesforce and they have REST APIs, then those two can talk to each other because they've followed the same protocols about how I'd access fields, how I'd go into the information, how I would get through security. I think what the MCPs does is they kind of now it's still APIs. We're not changing that model at all, but they are now the layer of both security and translation. So because again, agents they don't have all APIs. They have their own sort of LLM language. There are some that are just APIs because they are just what we call robotic process automation workflows. And so what this gives us is a translation layer or a layer in between all of that basically says we're gonna make this as even as possible, which I think gets back to your USB example, right? I think the biggest maybe thing that makes this more unique than what we've seen sort of in a general integration platform conversation or what we might have seen like with a Workato or something like that back in the day, is that there is some level of AI kind of working inside these MCPs as well, which is doing some of that translation. Unlike those areas where you have to program every little commentary, every little line, and every little, you got to, if I call an employee ID column B213 and it's here, then I got to know that it's column 5467 over here and it's called an employee ID. I believe if I understand what's happened to MCPs is there's a little bit of AI there, so you don't have to have quite as much sort of column 1 to column 2. You can just connect up to Salesforce or to Jira or to whatever, right? And make those connections. And to some extent, Pipedream that we just talked about for Workday is they are an MCP server, and that is part of what they've acquired. But they've built out 3,000 connections, which is still being built out through API. So it is still work that has to be done, those connectors, but it makes it easier. The translations become, and it's more secure. The security is what you're really looking for. It will not allow an AI code to go through that filter. It's just passing the data back and forth. Little bit like really old school, I'm going to get here, but data packets and servers back in the day, right? Like email used to be that I could not email Outlook to whatever at Lotus Notes back in the day, right? Like they had to create what we called a packet model to basically feed over the internet a little packet. Inside it was content. Inside of it then was the information in the email, and basically it sent it down the line. And the other email server picked it up and said, well, I can read that outside packet. I can read the inside packet. And now I'm going to show the full email, right? That was the work. Now they're just putting a really extensive data layer in there so you can't send anything nefarious through that packet, basically, right?
Yeah, that's a good callback. In fact, even our younger listeners might have seen, TCP/IP written on anything. That is what that is talking about. That's the transmission control protocol. P is that same idea. It's in that same idea there. The TCP/IP is the transmission control protocol, internet protocol that was about how data is packetized and then transmitted and then rerouted.
Yeah, and now modal context protocol is it's reading it and it's putting security on it so that I don't pass any nefarious things in between it. It is a safety protocol for agents, but it also makes them talk better. So I know that was a lot, but I think our listeners have to understand this. Whether you're in marketing, whether you're another vendor, most vendors get this. As a buyer, have to, one, you should know if the system has an MCP, and two, you should understand how your MCP, which is your businesses, will eventually buy it. I've just looked up the pricing on this. I was like, several $1,000s. It's gonna be a while before all the small guys get it, but it is feasible that it will be coming to you and your local environment pretty soon, right?
Yeah, and that's why we're starting to see these companies. I mentioned Nuvalex earlier, that's doing a lot of this work, but we've also talked about Lanai that's doing a little bit of this in a different way, but sort of an overview. And basically, we're talking about governance, where we saw data governance, not talking about AI governance or things that fall within the purview of governance, whether that be security or common data definitions, routing, all that sort of stuff. And it's interesting to see, as a new technology comes, all of the support and new companies that come up because of that. Right?
Yeah, exactly. This gets back to when you look at our data. Yes, 14% of enterprise organizations over 5,000 employees plan to reduce workforces due to AI, but more than 21%, but the same 21%, right, also plan to increase their workforce. And this is where it's happening, right? Like, yeah, there's going to be some optimization of skill sets and capabilities, but there's a lot more that's going to be needed, understanding this level of conversation.
That's exactly it. And as we talk about that, basically what's happening is more of these companies are looking to acquire companies that can help them with all of these different things. And not all of those are within the realm of AI, but there is a lot of that is driving it. We know that Sage, for instance, one of the companies we see in the report all the time, they've been around for a long time. They've acquired Criterion to help them with cloud payroll and HCM. Sage, has done sort of all we mentioned, that sort of bringing together of HR technology and financial and accounting info. That's something Sage has done for quite some time for the small to mid-sized businesses. And now with Criterion, that was earlier this month, they will have sort of a broader scope of their HCM type offerings for these companies.
Yeah, and I think that 'cause there's also Sage People, and I think there's a couple people components that go with some of the tools they bought there. This, I think, we're seeing the Sage HCM platform, which is a much older. I don't know if it's truly on premise or just sort of single tenant. It's sort of software based on your desktop in some cases. People are rapidly sort of shifting off of that. That I think this gives them a place to go to with some more work here. Yeah.
And we should, that is a full acquisition. And this next one, just like with Pipedream, so Workday had signed a definitive agreement to acquire Pipedream. That is slightly different for all of our attorney friends that are listening. The same sort of situation is here with Zoom. They have signed a definitive agreement to acquire BrightHire. It's a fun little rhyme there. So Zoom is one that Stacey and I were talking a bit in the green room beforehand about, it is interesting to see Zoom. All of us know and love Zoom. That one's just for our viewers.
For those who are not watching that.
It's just for the little Easter egg for the viewers. But, I saw them at Oracle. I think they might have been UKG too as a
booth.
Yeah, as a booth there. And, because they are work tech. We use them for HR, we use for communications. We see them in the survey as people using them. And now hiring with BrightHire that is sort of interviews in the flow of work, not unlike what we saw with UKG, if you recall our last episode, or I should say the episode before, where we talked about UKG's acquisitions that were very much looking at how do we meet frontline workers where they are, right? When they're doing the work, where do we meet people that are looking for a more conversational, informal, painless way, I think is what everyone's looking to hope to do for hiring. Zoom already has obviously quite a bit of the technology and the name recognition in mobile communications, video, webinars. It's what we're using right now to record this, as a matter of fact. So it sort of makes sense. How do we then take that and make it into part of the hiring process? So I think that's what
and it's worth noting on Zoom that if you haven't looked at their full sort of suite recently, like we're now, because again, we try and use as much as we can of kind of our anchor systems that we have here. And Zoom is one of them because we use it a lot for video, both briefings and for our podcast and for all of our meetings with clients and everything. We also use Teams. But they are now doing a calendaring tool. They now have like a Word document tool in there. They have a document management tool in there. This edition, when you think about what you need to do recruiting, a lot of the things all come together under that Zoom sort of moniker. This doesn't surprise me, but I do think this is, again, that difference between sort of consumer, direct to consumer sort of sales versus business to business sales. How does that play out? Zoom is sort of in that middle ground because they do direct to consumers, because there are a lot of people who use Zoom for a lot of different personal uses, but there's mostly business to business. The community kind of was an uproar on the TA side of this, Cliff. I mean, there was all kinds of LinkedIn comments when this went out, but I do think we are going to see a much more blurring of the lines of what is work tech, what is HR tech, what is, and how does AI sort of change that? And this is a very AI conversation. That's what they were doing. So I think we're going to see more like this in the coming months, right?
Yeah, we should mention that BrightHire is very much an AI hiring one. This is a newer company, and that's the sort of backbone there. So that plays in well too. We've got some brand new companies coming up. Home Thrive is co-founded by Amy Rice, who was at WorkHuman. Before this, we knew her there as the VP of Corporate Comms and the analyst. She is co-founding that Home Thrive with Dave Jacobs. Dave Jacobs comes from Medline, who makes, I believe, the largest provider of medical service products. And that will make sense because Home Thrive is allowing you to do healthcare services, especially family caregiving, home care, that type of thing that are incorporated within benefits. As benefits continue to expand out and have more and more, talk about that blurring the line, what can be considered a benefit, right? It used to be kind of almost like funny to see pet insurance. And now it's like, okay, there might be 6 different pet insurance providers you can choose from as part of your benefit package. And home care becomes more and more important. We definitely saw the need for that during the COVID years, but we also have an aging workforce and just an aging population. We have more need for this sort of service. So to be able to get people to have both experience in the sort of operation side of this, as well as the HR side, that come from that sort of employee experience and benefits background, that seems to be a good melding of expertise there.
Yeah, I saw similar tech that I actually but it's a little bit more like helping you navigate it, right? So I'm seeing a lot more techs like this come to the market. I'm not surprised. I haven't talked to Amy about this, but it was interesting to see you talk about this. We are seeing people sort of to try and sort of create tools that fit around the edges of how we manage our lives, right, in general. Mm-hmm. So this is definitely something that does not surprise me. And as we all are dealing with family members who have different needs, no matter where you are at in your life, we do not have good support structures here in the United States. And so it can derail not just your family and your emotions, but totally derail your career if you have to take care of a family member, right?
Well said. And then you mentioned earlier the pay equity laws, Stacey, and one of the things that immediately struck me was that the organizations that are specialized in providing that sort of data will definitely be at the forefront of that discussion, right? Who has that info that you need to now provide? One of the most well-known players in that space, of course, is PayScale, and they just recently came out probably knowing that there's going to be more and more information needed going into overdrive, and came out with a couple new AI solutions to get into both pricing and sort of ROI, I guess. So one is called Smart Price, which pretty much does what it says on the tin, I think. Giving you a better way to price jobs using agentic AI, using probably RAG as well. I would have to imagine, right? There's nothing more important than be able to get up-to-date information in this sort of way. So,
not hallucinating. This is not where I want my AI hallucinating is on job pricing.
Unless they're pushing it up, right? It depends on which side you are. So the idea is to pull all the different information sources that are out there in real time, do these mass searches, and give you the up-to-date pricing so you can do that. And then, of course, the other one, PayScale Compass, is looking at how do you prove the impact of pay. This is, you think about that as part of something I remember from school, taking HR classes of, what motivates people and what part of the employee experience truly is responsible for improving productivity. People love to use sales and manufacturing sort of test cases, use cases, case studies for these, but not all of our jobs are like that. Not all of us are motivated the same way. So here's a tool that purports to be able to gather a bunch of information and look at all of the different ways that you could define productivity within a job, bringing together all of that data, and then sort of create a scorecard, as they're calling it, to sort of see where would I get the biggest impact of pay, whether that be from increasing or gathering different skills or that sort of thing, or whether that's used for TA or employee engagement, et cetera. That is what this tool sets out to do.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see the comp data sets and the comp tools. There's only a few of them who do this well, and as they get better at what they're doing and their data sets get stronger and stronger and AI starts being part of it, these might be the most strategic tools we have in the HR function as we get there.
Yeah, is there anywhere people could go to figure out what are sort of the most highly rated in terms of customer user experience and vendor satisfaction scores? They could make those decisions better? Who knows? I can't think of one. Certainly not the largest and longest running. Okay, enough plugs. Hey, look, I feel like I'm plugging these other companies. So we talked about new companies coming up, but sometimes the opposite is true. We see some sunsetting. Now, Lattice is sticking around as a company, but they are sunsetting their HRS and payroll products. We talk about, I think I used the metaphor earlier of dipping the toes in the water. They're getting out of the pool. It's too cold. I don't know, Lattice, help me out.
Yeah, I'm just laughing because I think I sent this to you. Well, that didn't take long, right?
Yeah, that's your exact quote. I put it in there.
Yeah, Thomas Otter, one of our friends, he had a big commentary on this online on LinkedIn. And we're not laughing at Lattice. I mean, this is just hard. No. And when they said they were coming out and doing this, they I remember the conversation. Like, no, we're building our own payroll. I'm like, what? Why would you do that? I think they were ending up like private labeling some payroll. This is one of those hubris moments, I think, for everybody when they basically are like, yeah, it doesn't look that hard on the outside. And it's not always that it's actually hard, right? There's a conversation with an early conversation I had with the Rippling group around Parker Connor, their CEOs, sort of his belief that a lot of this is easy. It isn't always that it's hard to build the tech. The hard part is often keeping up with the amount of changes, the maintenance, the compliance is oftentimes it's what we tell people all the time. Our survey, anybody could come out and create our survey. What they can't oftentimes replicate is our distributor network, our process for getting the data, our brand information, and more importantly, sort of how we analyze that data. And I think that's one of the things that you see in all of this is that an HRS and a payroll system have so many connective points to every other system in your organization, that financially making money off of running it and maintaining it and having it up and running is really hard because the margins are a lot lower than talent management, which is just you can kind of build that. It's kind of once and done. Effective dating isn't as big of an issue there. So I think, that tends to be a lot of the challenge here, right? It's a much harder market to make money in, right?
Yeah. And also I'm going to shout out here Tammy Smith, our data science manager. If you're listening to this, we the phrasing there was a little off. Not anyone could build our survey. There is a way you word the survey. There's the types of the way you phrase the question, the kind of choices that people get, the structure of how they do it, what's open source. There's a lot there. But Stacey knows that. She is making a different point. It is extremely difficult.
It is very difficult, yes. Sorry, Tammy.
I'm saying that for you, Tammy. But we do get some more, as you mentioned, sort of keeping up with the times. There's one, Paychex. They are going to do AI-driven participant event notification for financial advisors. Talk about who do we work with, who needs this information, who in HR. So kind of going back to that idea of the aging workforce and getting the data to people that are doing retirement plans, for instance. And so this is a wealth management solution for financial advisors and giving them all of the information that is needed for real-time changes to work or life events to assist participants with any sort of financial planning needs, right? Because there's a lot, obviously, when you're doing financial planning, you need some of this work data, right? Again, where does that line end? This is part of sort of who you are and sort of your future as well. What was the comment earlier, Stacey, that we had from the webinar? How do you plan for the future if you're only thinking today?
Planning today, yeah. And that's a really hard one because I think, and particularly when you think about who Paychex audiences, which is on the SMB mid-market side, right? So sometimes financial planners are if I'm doing an SMB, that financial planner or that financial person is also my conduit to how I'm running HR altogether. They're actually running my HR for me. So there's a little bit of that built into here. And then on the flip side of that is that we know mid-market SMBs are getting more involved in things like offering retirement. I think our company's talking about doing it next year and even at our size, right? And so it is, and that's a lot of lift for someone who hasn't normally done it, right?
Speaking of sort of people here, Deal, who we've announced before, has a new president and CFO, Joe Kaufman. Joe Kaufman comes from Credit Karma. So again, coming from that sort of finance side, which kind of makes sense for a CFO. He'll be replacing Philippe, I believe it's Bozis, who was one of the founders, who will go into the sort of executive chairman, chief strategy officer, joining the ranks of, I guess I was about to say Stacey Harris, but I guess the chief research officer, a little better. Yeah, so that's kind of interesting, right? Because Deal obviously has been one of the sort of fast growing companies, always sort of in the news for one reason or the other, is most I'll say about that. But, it is very large. We've watched its growth through our data as well. They've been very successful in raising funding and have sort of been, I'd say, along with Rippling, another name that seems to come up with theirs, some of the more fast growing, and another one that has carved out a little space by integrating with other parts of the sort of business ecosystem, with finance and having that sort of IT and HR integrations and all of the things that they do. So pretty interesting.
And it's global, right? I think that's, you kind of see Deal, Rippling, Remote kind of falls into that a little bit too with the partnership work. But that global payroll conversation with all those things you just talked about is kind of what makes them unique. I know we hate to be salacious on here, but I do just have to, because we are spilling the tea, right? Like this week, as this announcement was coming out with the new president, they went back in and had some more sort of Deal Rippling issues, a little bit about like where the money was coming from. I think the new president here is the really important thing. Also, there's a new comms person. One thing I will say, and we said this last time, but I was talking to another investor today who's going to be visiting Deal when they're out talking to a couple other vendors in that area and region. And so I do not think all of this salacious news is impacting the view that the market sees and the value of what Deal is trying to accomplish. Now, we know that news definitely impacted their user experience and vendor stat, where last year they got much better ratings. This year we saw a much lower rating. We think because our survey was out right as a lot of that was happening. And so I think from a vendor satisfaction perspective, there was a lot of less interest in sort of having that conversation. But again, I always say don't throw stones in glass houses. Every organization has to really make sure that they have nothing that be untoward or it could be an issue. The investors don't seem to be having an issue with any of it, right?
Now we've got UKG, who we've mentioned. Gretchen Alcaron, please let me know.
Alcaron, yeah.
Alcaron, okay. Is joining UKG. There'll be a general manager for Pro, HCM, and Pay, working under Suresh Vital. There, Suresh has been really building out the team. Really, UKG in general has been, just really building out a kind of new leadership team. Gretchen, you've probably known her for quite some time, Stacey, because you work with a lot of the companies she's with. ServiceNow for 5 years, but most of the time with Oracle, right? 15 years.
Yeah, Gretchen was one of the first people I met in this space because she was also a longstanding PeopleSoft a sort of a talent. So she came from that whole Dave Duffield PeopleSoft group of professionals, and she ran the vision for Oracle for as we said, over 15 years, from the point at which they started talking about fusion until they actually got that up and running and moving in a way that I think was really powerful. She's always been a really solid, I would say, advocate for the HR profession, what it does, how important it is, what it gets across to the business line. She's very well versed in product development, product sort of driving it as a product leader. I think what we saw with ServiceNow and their growth in the HCM, once she joined there, big opportunities there. This role at UKG, I'm interested in hearing more about what she's going to do. I think this was definitely needed by UKG. I think Jen Morgan is doing a great job sort of building out her leadership community. But what we see is a lot of consumer tech roles that she's filling, or people with backgrounds not always in HR. They needed a solid HR, I think, leader to sort of come in, particularly with the pro product, but also who has experience, which I think Jen, which I think she does have, right? Is that experience that Gretchen brings to running a team who has worked on legacy systems. If you think about what Oracle had moving from PeopleSoft to there, if you think about what ServiceNow had, big legacy challenges, right? This is, I think, some of the biggest opportunity that Gretchen brings to the market is she knows how to go from legacy platform to brand new platform and make that transition efficiently, effectively, and in a way I think that honors the HR audience. So I was really glad to see she's doing this. I think it's going to be an important move for UKG, and we'll see where that goes for her. So just congratulations to her, and we're all voting for her to sort of, I think, make some changes there that are necessary, right?
Yeah. Well, we are getting towards the hour, so I'm going to do the sort of speed round now. Stacey, I'll mention a few stories. Tell me what you think. If you recall our special episode from just last month, we had with George LaRoque. He put out his quarterly market briefing from his company Workday as to the Q3 2025 global Workday market briefing. We've been mentioning M&A quite a bit on this show, so it may not come as a surprise to you that we hit $4.93 billion investment in work and HR tech across 155 deals through just Q3. So pretty impressive. You can go find that at worktech.com. We've got some interesting data that we saw from some other firms, EY, PwC, never heard of them. They sound interesting though. That smaller surveys, but do back up a lot of what we saw. I mean, we do, all jokes aside, we'd love to see other data out there. We don't see that as competitors. We see that as validation. As long as we're seeing that, we know that we're on the right track. It would be a little wild to see something different. And, maybe they might have a different take. But that wasn't the case. One that was pretty interesting, the data, only 5% of workers, this was sort of the headline from a couple of these studies, only 5% of workers use AI in ways that change their job. Very interesting stat, but quite in line. The EY Work Imagined report, a little bit smaller, as I mentioned, only 15,000 employees and 1,500 employers, but still some of the data was very much in line with what we saw, right? Stacey, 88% of employees say they already use AI at work, but mostly for simple tasks like searching and summarizing. One of the things that we saw over the last couple of years of us asking this question is, Wow, I thought it would be higher, but then we realized we needed to change, again, how we ask that question. Are you
Yeah.
using AI that you're bringing, perhaps? And that's been a lot of what you've been talking, right? That bring your own AI. It found that 54% have used AI in their jobs at least once in the last year, but only 14% use it at work every day. Which could look a little bit different, but it's also in sort of how they're defining that, right? That's one of the things you have to look at. They did see some productivity gains amongst those that used it. We tend to look at that at the business level. Those organizations that find that they're using their embedded AI, basically the AI they're supposed to be using, that is designed specifically for work tasks, do tend to be more productive in the business outcomes that we monitor, as well as the HR outcomes and talent outcomes.
Yeah, I thought the biggest one here, Cliff, on this one, I just want to call it, is only 12% of employees feel they receive enough AI training. And only a minority of companies track are on track to reach their, what EI calls their talent advantage, where people and technology are aligned. I think when we think about the number one issue is knowledge, and only 12% of employees said they were getting the training they needed. That's just a shout out to everyone. What is your training strategy for AI? That should be on your plan. So I'll just leave it at that, right?
Yeah, the one we have, I think we ask, what sort of guidelines, rules, regulations, what are you doing basically to help your employees with AI? 64% have none or don't know. Okay, I guess. So we're on one hand, we're saying, this is really helpful. We really want to use AI. Well, what are you doing to help people do that? We bought it.
Use it, right? Yeah.
And then this was really interesting. This is an MIT study that only 5% of companies that go all in on AI. I do not know exactly how that was defined. If you've ever read an MIT study, it makes explaining MCP look easy, but I'll look through some more. They actually find that they are actually rehiring some of the workers they let go in favor. Originally, they let them go for AI. Those companies, the majority of them are rehiring them. Visier actually did some of the tracking on this. So something like, was it 5.3% terminated hires are rehired by their former employers typically. However, that number has jumped drastically, the highest it has been at any other time since 2018. Think about that. There was a massive rehiring boom in 2021 post-COVID when we had to let a lot of people go just out of necessity. This is higher than that, the rehiring. So that means that a lot of the drops that we saw because of AI turned out to be maybe getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, this is what I really love, seeing the analytics platforms like leverage their data and mix that up with a little bit of thinking from an MIT or something like that, right? Like, we know from our data that if you do layoffs, within 2 years, your business metrics are just down, by almost 40% in some cases, right? From where someone who didn't do layoffs and who is at the same level as where you're at, right? So it does not, yes, you save short-term money, but you don't do it effectively on the long run. And this is basically saying, and then I got to go spend more money to hire them back, right?
Absolutely. Well, that's it. I know normally we talk about the events we would be at. Stacey and I will be an event, but it'll be over by the time you hear this. And I think that one's kind of very quickly in and out because we've got holidays, we've got personal travel. I guess if you're listening to this, I don't know what our listenership is in Mauritius, but I will be in Mauritius the second half of January, probably from the 15th to, I don't know, the 25th or so. So any Mauritius listeners, shout out, I'll come visit. I can't promise any sign.
Where in the world, Cliff? Maybe give a little bit of context for our friends who are not as globally traveled as you.
Yeah, so to be fair, I had to look it up. We talked about med devices earlier with Medline. A good friend of mine, shout out to Eric Deli, has been working in the med device companies for quite some time. Typically around this time of year, I go to Paris, where his company is headquartered. They do a lot more of their testing now in Mauritius, French colony, like I said, Madagascar, the Seychelles, the Maldives, that sort of space. Small island. Looks beautiful from all the pictures. They just got a huge mango crop. And apparently I'll be having mango salad for breakfast and mango sandwiches for lunch and fried mango for dinner. Mango smoothies to drink. But Very much looking forward to it. A little bit of a tropical thing. Different vibe, I think, than Paris. But again, if we've got any listeners in that area, love to hear from you.
Cliff's going to be in the area. You can meet the. Well, thank you everyone for taking the time to listen to us. We know it's been a long one today, but it's been a while since we've been on the air, so we just wanted to make sure we caught up on all the different news. As we wrap today, again, just a reminder that if you are looking for some of the data that we've talked about here that is specific to your organization and benchmarking, you can find the full report that we do on the annual research report for the 2025, as well as now the segments in our marketplace. And also, if you're a research, you can log in also and become a Research Center member. That will give you access to some of the free content, most of which is in the webinar decks, those kind of things, but it's still really valuable if you're just trying to sign up, figure out a way to get access to that. Also, go to our website, sign up for our newsletter to get ongoing updates on our research launches, where we'll be speaking or visiting, and when you can participate in the annual survey, which is, again, cycle will start again in April, so just keep an eye out for it. Be sure to listen to our sister HR Huddle podcast, HR We Have a Problem, hosted by our CEO, Terry Zipper. These HR Huddle episodes are important, and if you do like them and want to have more of this, please be sure to comment, give us some information on what is working or not working so well for you in our Work-Defined podcast location. Stay up to date with immediate breaking HR tech news and get all the behind-the-scenes content. You can follow us at Sapient Insights on LinkedIn and Instagram. Thanks, Cliff. Cliff, thank you for all that you do, for putting all of this together. Thank you to our production team, including Brand Method Media Group, who helps us produce our podcast, run by their amazing founder, Kelly. Our marketing team, Summer Orlano, Cole Harris, Linda Galloway, Caitlin Diamond. It keeps growing. All of them have now a hand in getting this up and running. Thanks to our listeners and our community. We couldn't do this without you. Cliff, that is it for this episode of Spill the Tea on HR Tech. We hope it's been just the brew you needed to start the engines running this week. Hopefully, wherever you're at, it's a little bit toastier and warmer, so that you are not in the middle of cold winter weather. We'll be back in just 2 weeks with another pot of boiling hot HR Tech updates and insights. Bye, everyone.